All right, Scoops here for the Tigers. We have the Tigs, the Titans, and the Warriors to go here, which will come out hopefully sometime this week. We'll get them all out so you can have a good study of Scoop's thoughts as well. So welcome in, mate. Let's kick it off with your thoughts on Appy Coruscant goal kicking in the trial, mate.
Anytime you see goal kicking shift from one player to another, it creates a lot of, is there a situation here? Because it can shift players' points by 5, 6, 7, 8 points just from purely having or not having. I mean, I'm not reading too much so far into Pappenhausen not kicking goals, but I mean, that's also a factor as well. So things like that are very interesting. I do need to probably see whether the Tigers run a bench hooker, which I suspect they might, as to whether Appy's a go, because if he's just going to be playing 60, 65 with goal kicking, it still might not be enough. But if he is looking like he'll play 80, or at least play 80 relatively regularly, far out, he looks pretty enticing.
He was probably one of the more exciting players from the weekend. He obviously kicked the goals. He kicked from dummy half, went for a 40-20 on one of them, and it was a good kick and tackled well and ran the footy well as well. I think he's 23 and he only played like 20 odd minutes max, low 20s. So he's very, very interesting at the price, obviously, with the really no one's really set on any hooker at the moment in fantasy. So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. Alamalo, mates, looks like he's probably a little bit down the pecking order and probably needs a bit of time moving from rugby to league here.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of these fringe wingers are all getting a go, and some of them got lucky, some of them did all right, and some got knocked out, unfortunately. Didn't we have like four blokes get knocked out this weekend? It was pretty ordinary.
Yeah. I think I can remember three off the top of my head with Casey and Mapapalangi and the like. But yeah, very, very
Yeah.
tough on the field. And obviously some guys that are coming into first grade style, obviously trials there and the speed and just a bit all over the shop, I suppose it can happen as well. And some tackle technique and whatever else. That Mapapalangi one wasn't nice. Just the tackle technique, it wasn't great.
Yep.
So yeah, Johnny Bateman, maybe we didn't get to see him in this first trial. But he's sort of one of the only ones we didn't see really, and he'll be likely to feature next week. We had Isaiah Papali'i on the right. Where do you see Bateman lining up?
Well, there has been a bit of talk, and in this trial as well, someone who'll touch on a bit more later, Seyfarth potentially going 13. But yeah, if IPAP's playing on the right, that either means Bateman's going to be lock or Bateman's going to switch sides with him. And I don't mind that for Papali'i, actually. Bateman will be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, he's always been that high 50 scorer before this Tiger stint and during this Tiger stint. So I mean, I think there's potential for him to average a little bit more than he did last year. But yeah, I mean, he has a buy round one. We've got a ton of value edges. Just pick him up during Origin because the Tigers are one of the two teams, I think, not to have a buy more than one buy during that whole Origin period. So they're quite valuable.
So spread out, isn't it? 1, 13, and 26 for their buys. They seem to me, for the most part, are going to be an interesting team to look at after a couple of weeks. And if they've improved, then there's probably a decent amount of value with a few of these guys. Hey, with Papali'i and
Oh,
Bateman kind of being a little bit off last year. Bateman also had carried a few injuries too, obviously coming into the season. And yeah, we'll have to see what happens with Seyfarth and the halves. And there's a lot to the team, right?
yeah, I think there's uh, a lot of value positions, a little bit like the Raiders. If the right players go into the right spots, there's going to be guys that we really want, and potential a couple of guns to have throughout the year. So I'm really interested to see how Bateman and IPAP do go because they could be one of those guns we bring in round 6, sort of a thing, as like a cash cow upgrade if they're starting to go well and they haven't rushed away in price up to where they're going to max out.
Yeah, you can imagine if Buncham being a massive round 14 buy as well. Hey, um,
Mm.
to cover all the rest of those buys. We didn't have that at all last year, did we? Like we had Eels being a pretty good team for it, but they still had two buys in that period, and they were what was it, 14 and 18 or something like that for them. So yeah, to have
Yeah,
round 14, 16, 17, 19, and 20 for one team. Let's just hope we have some options there for
yeah.
sure. Dream Buller, mate, he's going to be a watch over the first few weeks as well.
Yeah, he's a good player, came onto the scene, did really well for a while, but I mean, 38 average is probably where I'd expect him to sort of sit, maybe increase a little bit, but yeah, he's playing in a team where he's not goal kicking and they're not going to be doing as much attack as plenty of the other higher ranked teams. So yeah, I don't see him turning into a 50-point player overnight, for example.
Yeah. De Silva and Simkin will leave the chat on until we get an injury from Appy, and let's hope we don't. Dewey as well, sort of mid-season for him. Latu Fainu and Lockie Galvin, mate, your thoughts on them as a starter? Obviously, they didn't get a crack. Galvin actually was a late pullout for this trial as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think was it Sullivan had a pretty solid game and could be just pushing those two out. I mean, they're the young guys who are potentially going to be the future for the Tigers because Sazer's not going to be around for ages and ages, and at least one of these guys looks to be there in the future. But yeah, I mean, Lockie Galvin was let go by the Eels because he was too small and he was too young, and now he's like 190 something centimeters, but he's still only 18. So both of these guys have a lot of talent and a lot of potential. They've just got to actually get into the team. Unless there's humongous mail that they're going to, you probably just have to wait until they actually do. But base price, heart, in the spine, you can't go wrong with that.
Definitely, mate. And Sullivan and Abby Coruscant both looking the same, basically, with their with their bleached hair. Did you see that? Pretty funny. The Finer brothers, mate, Samuela and Sione, they both had really good trials on the weekend, but we still see them sort of well out of the either bench forward or out of the 17.
I probably had Samuela pretty close to the team with Seyfarth looking more like a chance for 13 or a bench spot. I'd probably have Samuela behind him, but if we do see him at some point this year, he could be an option. But yeah, he's not base price, so he'd need a decent crack at it in order to be value.
Definitely, mate. We saw Asu Kapoa play on the edge on the weekend. We know he has some talent, but where do you see him come TLT in round two for them?
Yeah, I probably do see him missing out when Bateman comes back. It was probably always going to be a fight between one of Kapoa, Seyfarth, and Pole starting, and the others sort of just making way with IPAP and Bateman there. So one of those three is probably going to be there, and two of those three would be value. It'd be really nice if it was Kapoa, but I think he's probably slid back compared to the others a little bit.
Yeah, the awkward price, isn't it? 340. Mate, we'll leave Clemmer there. He's kind of slowly falling away. 30 years old now. Just the minutes aren't going to be there for him with a few of these guys coming through. Obviously, Abdi Coruscant at 608. If there was no hooker on this bench, does that pique your interest? Even as a looper in round one, we could play Hands or Lussick and have him as a goal kicking nine that we saw at the back end of last year when he took that goal kicking that he scored pretty well, right?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that has been a gun whenever he gets 80. And he's been able to knock out 50s even when he's not quite playing 80 in the past sometimes. So I think that if he kicks again in the second trial, I'm going to be very interested in seeing what's there. But I don't think we're going to get an answer to whether he's playing 80 minutes in that trial because they will still move a few players around. They will still get a De Silva or a Simpkin playing a little bit. I don't think we're going to see maximum minutes from everybody. So for me, I have him more as one of those first guys who you can pick up in maybe round two, round three, round four, when one of your mid ranges hasn't gone as well as hoped or gets injured or something along those lines. It just seems like a much safer, lower risk option than trying to grab him and then it going wrong and him scoring 42.
Yeah, at least see it first. Mate, with Justin Matamua, didn't play on the weekend either, I believe. Yeah. Probably not in this 17 or close to it at this point. The talk of him going to 13, not really there anymore, right?
No, I think Seyfarth's well ahead of him at the moment.
Yeah. So we'll talk about him a little bit later. Same with Miller. Brent Naden will leave. Justin Olam at 375, obviously a lot cheaper than he was in the previous year and sort of was, Dally M center of the year. So at the Tigers, is he a watch, see how the Tigers play and assess from there? Do you see much value in Justin?
It's sort of hard to read him because he had a pretty down year, didn't look fantastic, and moved to a worse team. However, that could also mean they funnel the attack into him as a senior player and somebody who's been really good for the Storm as a weapon in the past. So I'm not really looking at him to start just because I don't know which way it's going to go and the round one bye. Something to note, guys, with this whole Tigers team not playing round one, you've got to be really certain if you're going to take a punt on some of these guys. So he's not somebody who's on my radar to do take a punt when, I mean, centers are already a bit stripped for round one.
Yep. And then Isaiah Papali, any further thoughts on him, or is it just buy a bit later in the season?
Yeah, probably by a bit later. I mean, he's over 700k, and we've got like about 6 or 7 4 to 500k edges, even after some of the others are getting injured or splitting minutes or whatever. So I'm pretty happy that he moved to the right in the trial. If he plays right like he did at Parramatta, I mean, he might score a little bit better than he was last year. I'm quite interested to see because it's a different halves pairing. It's going to be different, but I mean, we know what his scoring and fantasy potential is, so I could definitely see a high 50s from him if it all goes well.
Definitely, mate. And Fanua Pole, if he was to get the start in this next trial and looking likely for round two, would you avoid him anyway?
Yeah, I mean he played in the starting team a lot last year and is priced accordingly.
Beautiful. Alex Seyfarth, mate, any thought if he was to start next trial with everyone back and scores pretty well, let's say that those defensive numbers are up a bit and he still looks like he's running hard. Is he someone that you could look to use as a looper, or at 359, is he, again, more of a wait and see kind of thing?
I want to see him starting lock again with Bateman and IPAP there. If he is, I'm a lot more happy to take him. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a looper in round one, but it also has the potential to go wrong. So it could be Pole. If we see Seyfarth starting Pole bench, I am a lot more happy to jump on him. I've got him in my team currently, just sitting there as a sort of that price guy who sort of works and lets me have a little bit of flexibility as I head in towards the season. But yeah, I'll be really keen to see how they line up for this second trial because he could be some sneaky value.
Definitely, mate. And then Aiden Caesar at 477, likely without the goal kicking now. Does that sort of really turn you off him?
Yeah, not without the goal kicking. He was sort of logically is going to be the dominant playmaker and get a lot of stats as a result of that. But logic also says he hasn't played in the NRL for 4 years. He's never been a great fantasy scorer and could just be a bit of a bit of a nothing burger. So I think without the goal kicking, you just don't look at him.
Definitely, mate. And moving on to Jaden Sullivan, moving over from the Dragons to the Tigers, you've got him playing a very similar role and no real value.
Yeah, well, I was discussing with someone earlier today on the Discord. I think you've got guys who play next to dominant halves, like Schuster next to DCE. You had well, Sullivan and Amone at the Tigers. You got the whoever's next to SJ. None of them score particularly well just because they're doing not a lot of kicking. They're not goal kicking, and the playmaking's really they're chipping in, but they're not doing a lot of stat making. It's like Ezra Mam, who scored 12 tries last year and I think averaged like 33. It's sort of a rookie trap to get stuck into those big name guys who just aren't going to be those stat makers for you. And I think we could see Sullivan just kind of sit about where he's priced.
Definitely, mate. And Stafford Toa, if he takes the leap this year, we'll have a look at him after their bye. You got Junior Tupou at 417 as well. We probably want to see him take the leap as well, right?
Yeah, he didn't have very many tries last year, which as a Tigers winger, there's a bit of rotation risk and stuff like that. But I mean, you've got Nofaluva leaving, and if he does get down in price a little bit, he could be one that you just pick up later on if they look like they're going to go on a bit of a run, a bit like Xavier Coates last year, although probably less of a certainty to have a bit of an uptick.
For sure, mate. And then 12, the hero, won't spend any time on him. He's very expensive at 624. And then Stefano as well, mate, at 587. He looked good in the trial again, but the minutes is a worry in this pack, isn't it? I don't think he can get enough to be worth it, can he?
No, not when Bateman and IPAP are 80 minutes and Clemmer's taking pretty big minutes as well.
Yeah, speaking of those minutes now, you've got those two at 80, Clemmer at 50. He'll be somewhere around that 45, 50. You'd say very likely. Even with Coruscant at 65, sorry, you've got a bench hooker. And if there wasn't to be a bench hooker there, that hurts these forwards even more, doesn't it? So Seyfarth at 50, you've got there with 8.9 points of value and a little bit of value on Papali'i and also Bateman with 3 and 4. respectively. And I think that's completely fair. It's just that round one bye is a bit of a killer. But I suppose that the Tigers probably not as relevant in round one, but they're definitely going to be relevant for us throughout the season.
Oh, they're definitely a relevant team, especially because of the way their draw set up. If you have a look at them, they're actually, I think it's really good for fantasy, but I think they've been a bit hard done by the NRL because from round 2 to round 26, they got 1 week's rest. They're going to be absolutely cooked by the end of the season.
Mm.
So hopefully they don't fall off too much towards the back end of the year.
Yeah, and round one, you're probably just itching to get out there, aren't you? And get amongst it. Even like around 3 or 4 buys, kind of like, all right, we can reset and go
Yeah.
through our tactics and whatever else and kind of get that sorted. But I suppose yeah, round 26 doesn't really help, does it? Especially when they're not likely to make the final. So you probably want for a team like the Tigers, you probably want to round 3 or 4, around 11 and like around 18 or something, and then kind of just see if they can go on a bit of a run to finish the year. So yeah, interesting one how they've worked that out. Maybe just they didn't think the Tigers were very relevant, so we don't need them in the blockbuster round one fixture. Eh?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go this year because they keep chopping and changing and thinking that they'll improve. And I mean, they've done enough that they could have some improvement this year. But yeah, uh, we just need to see it happen first.
Yeah, that from round 14 onwards is not a bad little run for him. So yeah, I think those
Yeah.
forwards and depending where the outside backs or the half situation's at, like we could see a Fainu or a Galvin or something like that during that time as well if there's injuries. So yeah, they could be really fun. We might have 3 or 4 in our team, and hopefully they are playing a bit better, so it's not a tough watch like last year with with probably not getting great ball and whatever else. But yeah, we'll leave the Tigers there, mate. Short and sharp on that one. Not super relevant coming into round one, but yeah, plenty of relevance from there. And yeah, we're recording these on Monday, guys, so we should have them all out hopefully before the next trials. So the information is up to date, and you can get into these teams and learn from the scoop. See you guys.